Hello and welcome to TFT Worlds final day, game number 3. Enjoy.
The whole point is that you reduce that band of variance, and you're not really going to win lobbies, but you also rarely bottom out the 7th and 8th because you are going to have a 2-star board that can win in the mid stage of the game and can potentially find ways to pressure the lobby. I'm looking at some of the compositions that we saw that were a little bit more obscure. We saw Twitch Reroll do well yesterday, for example. We saw Talon kind of be busted out every now and then, and you can see that he has actually that Nocturne 2 and that Talon as a good way to start preserving some HP.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, actually, is that if you're not going for first place, rerolls are a pretty good way because you'll have that stronger board, probably around stage 4, that we can start beating everyone else and can do pretty well. So I actually really like that call out. Moving over to Luli's board here, we've got Electrocute. Again, Electrocute, another pretty good generic augment here, especially with the Hextech start. The Hextech start giving that extra shield, which will allow even more time for those Electrocute procs. So this is a pretty good opener that you've got to be pretty happy with. And uses the Sunfire
look at the
here
tempo.
too. Yeah.
What else are you going to really do with 2 belts and a vest? Your only other option is Warmogs, and I think that the Sunfire is better at killing units because right now, for Lee's perspective, he kind of lacks a little bit of damage. Only has a Caitlyn 1, only has that Jarvan Electro Charge, trying to get as much mileage as possible. The second ace in the hole is good. So looks like at worst going to lose by just 1. Champion's going to be to the wire. Wow, look at that. Maxing every ounce of value possible for the win.
Yeah, that was really good. That Sunfire definitely made the difference there. That burn applies for 10 seconds, so it keeps going for a while. The Caitlyn ult hitting the right character. That was a really close fight, allowing him to win here. And now with the Jarvan 2 and that Sunfire, now the Malzahar also, this is a lot of actually sort of passive damage, and so he could actually take a lot of these early game fights. Looking at these augments real quick, I think the ones to call out here are Goobums with Blue Battery, looking more an AP tree because of that. And then Liquid Goose with the Pandora's items, allowing him to get sort of those best in slot items we've talked about. Any other ones jump out to you?
Yeah, I really like Knife's Edge, particularly in the early game. It's really good for streaking, but it also unlocks another composition, in my opinion, that people are really sleeping on, which is trying to play more of the vertical challengers and utilizing Tryndamere as well as Draven as your primary carries with some really powerful top-end options of Kai'Sa and maybe even more legendaries. I think Knife's Edge is the entire key to that composition because you combine that flat AD with attack speed and some real big powerful stuff happens. Speaking of powerful, this board from Goobums just 4-0 wiped. Goobums, unfortunately, has been under the wrath of Goose almost all weekend. They've been in lobbies nonstop, kind of killing each other and taking big damage. There's a little bit of NA infighting here.
Yeah, for sure. It was interesting that they were in the same lobbies pretty much all day yesterday. I really like this board from Goose, by the way, though. Using Twitch 2. Twitch 2 this early is a lot of power, can get on that backline. Twitch's weakness is that he has one of the low HP, very low armor, can die very quickly. Using the Edge of Night to kind of alleviate that and get even more damage on the backline. I really like this choice for a strong stage 2.
Yeah, and it works, hand in hand with the fact that Chemtech gives you attack speed, you get the Edge of Night attack speed. Maybe Twitch 2 is just a really good item holder for this situation. I think that's exactly what Goose has identified. Going up against Dudu, who has played a Yordle board, he's just trying to preserve HP, but can anybody preserve HP against a Chemtech? Health regen and the damage reduction, absolutely not. Another 4-0, and it can't be overstated the importance of how dramatically Goose is winning. He's applying a lot more pressure to those who are losing than they would desire, which is going to potentially lopside the tempo of this lobby.
Yeah, for sure. We always look at those health totals of whoever's in 8th place at each point, and 76 basically means you got 4-0'd every single fight. So Dudu kind of as low as he can be right now, which maybe if you're playing Mercenary and you can use that to sort of come back from, that's fine. But otherwise, we're not seeing strong economic augments here. We're not seeing anything. It's actually been a very tier 1 heavy day today. And so that's not really the spot you want to be in, especially, again, as this checkmate format hits, you need every single point to move up. Interestingly enough, right now, look at the top of the lobby right now. It's our top 2 players.
It's our top 2 players, the 2 Chinese players. Also, look right above that, and it explains everything about why Goose slammed the items the way he did. We have a voracious appetite mutant trait, which means that when your ally dies, you gain a bunch of offensive stats to be able to stack your Kai'Sa, your Malzahar, and that's exactly what Goose needed if he's going to force his Zerat portals and his Edge of Night onto these hyper carriers. So we'll see who ends up leaning into it. There is a little bit of a difficulty of hitting Kai'Sa, and if everybody's rolling for Kai'Sa, you could try to formulate your mutant plan and then you go 8th. I mean, Goose experienced exactly that on his path to the World Championships to this point. So we'll see whether or not he's able to get that done as we take a look at TXE, a player who went 8th last game, needs to pick it up. Seems like he's going to try to go up against Dudu, who will also continue to, or try to continue his lose streak, but both these players at level 4, and I don't think this Nard is going to take down this Poppy, so a successful continuation of his lose streak in the most optimal way possible. That's a great loss for TXE.
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of want to talk about Voracious Appetite a little bit because we haven't seen it much on the mainstream this tournament. But if you look at the meta right now, and we talk about how the Sivir Striker 442 comp is kind of that S+ tier comp, the Voracious Appetite mutants would be labeled as like S++. It is really good. We saw one game off stream in day 1 where Milk, for example, was able to turn a mercenary into a Voracious Appetite mutant and win at level 9 with 80 gold left over. You use that Kai'Sa, that Edge of Night, and you just get so much AP and AD from all those dead units, from things like Zerat portals, from things like target dummies, and it is just a powerful comp. And so in these situations, at least in all the tournaments sort of leading up to this, and all the mock tournaments and practice games, anytime one of these lobbies comes up, it is very competitive. Everyone looking for those Zerats, those Edge of Nights, and trying to find those Kai'Sas. Get that early bit online. You can use the Malzahar in stage 3 as an item holder for that Kai'Sa. And so like you said, this is going to very much shape the lobby into something we haven't seen a lot on stream so far.
You know, something we also don't see a lot more, Dog, is 3 players streaking at the end of stage 2. Both Chinese players, which is already pretty massive for Li Luo. We again talked about Li Luo just needs to play for 6, but for Wuzhou and Liu Li, I guess, you know, it's a really unusual situation where none of them faced each other, and they're able to have maximum economy boost from that PvE interest round. So we do see on the opposite end, Goobums and Altenahui tied at 66. Altenahui, it feels like regularly is playing from a lose streak position, but last game it didn't work out so well.
Yeah, for sure. And you can kind of see, again, we talk about how this is a Voracious Appetite lobby. If everyone's going for that, that can leave the Sivir comp open. And you look at these items, and what do you see? You see a Quicksilver Last Whisper Ginsu's. Maybe this is a chance for him to get that sort of uncontested. And even if that's only a third, losing to some of the high roller Voracious Appetites, that's still 6 points towards that checkpoint format. That might be exactly what he's looking for here. And so I think expect to see him sort of stay out of that mutant lane, try to find those Sivirs, and hopefully he can get some of those points that he really needs to move up in the standings.
Yeah, the tricky thing is that it doesn't really lean into what makes the Knife's Edge strong, or even Striker. Striker's ready to get a lot of flat AD. Oh, there's one up against Goose, who has that Zerat slammed already, so is in a really good position. If you can get 2 of them, his mutants are going to be sitting pretty. And Goose has the right idea. I think a lot of people look too much for the mutants themselves. That's just the end goal. There's an entire journey of how we get there. And Goose is choosing just a traditional Chemtech spot and not really greeting for Yordle, trying to keep his tempo high, recognizing that he's going to need as much HP as possible in order to find that Kai'Sa.
Yeah, for sure. Zerat's one of those items that kind of doesn't get a lot of credit. It's very good in the early game, can get you there. And that's one of the other things that makes this Voracious Appetite so strong, is that you're actually allowed to use those Zerat portals to get you through the early game. And then when you hit, like you said, transition, be powerful, and take it to the late game. And that's what makes it such an amazing comp in this meta.
I agree. So, what does Altenahui want to do here? He kind of is in this spot where he's bleeding out, but he doesn't want to roll because he feels like he needs to mass up more resources. If you are going to roll, try to roll at 7, but you don't want to bleed too much. We saw what happened to TXE last game. Speaking of, here is TXE, who also has done a great job preserving HP up to this point. Now going up against Li Luo, who's slamming everything for tempo. That's a Hand of Justice Quicksilver onto a Nocturne Shoe to try to pressure the lobby. We talked about how Assassins are great early game. And that's exactly what he's doing to clean up another Vault Breaker. in order to stun that entire front line. Lilo is doing some really high pressure onto this lobby.
I love it too, and the crazy thing is he could go even more pressure, right? He's still level 630 gold, you know, compared to TXE's level 640 gold. So like this is really good play. I also really like the Hand of Justice slam on the Nocturne. Nocturne is a really good mix of both physical damage from the auto attacks and being an assassin, as well as the magic damage from his spell. And Hand of Justice is one of the few items that when you're kind of that 50-50 split, you get the Omnivamp from both. Oh, here we go. Goobums has a chance for Recombobulator. Goobums thinks this augment is ridiculously overpowered. Unfortunately, if you look at his board, I don't think he has a ton of champions to truly take advantage of it. So we'll have to see if he leans into it. Stand United, probably a good backup. But we might see a Recombobulator choice here. Sure enough, he goes with it. Gets the Gnar 2, Renata 1, Jin 1. Not super amazing, but still, that's a Gnar 2 and a Jin 1. Like, 2 Jins. You can't complain about that.
Yeah, WTF 2 Jins. This is a really interesting mix of units, and somehow he stumbled onto 3 Socialite at the same time as well, having a Jewel Gauntlet and a Gnar. Talk about being dropped into an awkward situation here. Group of misfits trying to make it happen. So from this spot, what does Goobums choose to do? As you can see that he does end up selling that town for gold. And he does have some semblance of damage. I just don't really know how this board's going to perform more, to be honest.
Yeah, this is a hard one, and I think this is why Recombobulator, if you look at it in, you know, sort of even the public data, it looks really bad. But Goobums is such a fan because if you know how to play around it and know how to use it well, it can definitely make your comp way stronger than the pace of the lobby. In this case, that Gnar 2, even though he's not going to win this fight, still did a lot of damage. I think this is going to be close. Actually, the Vex might lose this, so props to Goobums here. But the thing is now, you look at these options, and he's got the blue battery, he's got that Renata. You know, he could go maybe a Jeweled Gauntlet variation if he can get the right items. And there's the Zyra finish. Yep. So, but yeah, that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult to pilot is there's just so many ways you could go, and a lot of players really struggle with figuring that out.
Whoa, there's a lot of spatulas. But people also want to prioritize the mutants. They also want to prioritize the Zerat portals. Goobums beelines immediately for a spatula as well, which is particularly curious to me. There's also a spread of belief that, you know, there could be some other ways you can play the Voracious Appetite mutants outside of just straight up vertical mutants. You can do 3 mutants, but play like Innovators, for example. You get an extra unit to die with the Scarab, with the Bear. So there's definitely some options at his disposal, and I'm very curious how Goobums will end up employing this. If he ends up finding that Cloak, immediately rolls and finds Jin 2. Woo. That is a big pickup for Goobums.
It is. At the same time, these items are really rough for the Jin. We have no AD items. This is rough. Looking at the augments on the side here, nothing really jumping out here except Goose with the Challenger Heart, which again will allow that Kaisa now to not need a second Challenger. So Goose definitely looking like the sort of Voracious Appetite leader right now based on the augments. But yeah, this is a Jin 2 and that feels good. It is a Jin 2 with no items. Now, Jin is definitely one of the champions that is the least item dependent. He scales really well just with his base damage. The Clockwork gives him attack speed, which is converted into even more AD. So that's got to feel good. By the way, looking up though, the one thing we have to call out is we still have 2 streakers right now. Now, the streak looks like it's about to end for Lilo, but that's still 2 players at 100 health at 3-5.
Yeah, and that gives Lilo a lot of flexibility because he's backed up his gold, right? The whole point of this was that he didn't level to 7. He wasn't trying to preserve, and quite frankly, it might have been a level 7 difference. Yeah. And it's a tale of 2 different stories as he does end up losing his streak. Now, Mor, I want to ask you a question. What if I told you that Jewel Gauntlet is very quietly a high-performing stat in the data for Jin? Would that surprise you at all?
It wouldn't surprise me. The thing with Jeweled Gauntlet is a good part of the budget is in that your spells can crit, and Jen does not take advantage of that. But another part of the budget is the fact that it just gives ability power and critical strike damage and chance. And so having Jin crit more and get bigger crits is what Jin is looking for. It's not the worst item. It's clearly not optimal. No one's arguing that. But it's not something that can be wasted. And this actually came up with things like Jeweled Lotus, for example, that is still giving your team crit. And again, you can math it out and say like it only will average an X DPS, But the reality is, TFT is often about spiky damage. That's why crit can be so valuable. A single crit can kill a unit that you might not have, that won't be able to heal up from that. And so those crits can make a pretty big difference. And so that doesn't really surprise me, you know, that it's an okay item on Jin.
Yeah. A lot of crits also activating those electro charges there as Liu Li able to finish his stage 3. Also on a win streak, finds a Kaisa. This is a voracious appetite mute lobby. Wow, my voice is going to pitches I never knew was possible. This is absurdly good for Liu Li, who needs to be able to catch his fellow Chinese brethren in first place. This is massive.
Yeah, that is a big hit. Again, we talked about how the Voracious Appetite, part of the challenge is getting through the early game with the Zeroth, with the Malzahar, so that you can get the Kaisa. If you can get a Kaisa with an Edge of Night in this lobby, that's pretty much the, you know, the GG here. Now, there's no Edge of Night. We do have one armor on that Swain there. So if he can get a sword, he will be in an amazing position here. But to get gift-wrapped that Kaisa without even rolling at level 7, that is as high roll as you can get in this kind of situation. That feels good, especially while being at 100 health. Meanwhile, we move over like Goose's board here, and we can see like the mutant stat being built, the Zerat here, but using Tryndamere for now to try to get to that point. And this is where, you know, hopefully Goose can find that Kaisa, but until then, he's kind of, you know, shambling about trying to get there.
Yep, that's right. For now, we'll see whether or not we can do this very creative variation of Voracious Appetite, getting the additional stats on the Tryndamere, who gets to cleanse himself with the Edge of Night. Tryndamere is often seen as a mid-game counter to a Sivir 1 because he spins to the corner and can utilize his gap closer to be able to finish it off, as the spinning slash is going to do it there for Goose. Every win is so valuable because he doesn't have to spend his gold in order to get more powerful, giving him more chances and looks at level 8.
Yeah, for sure. Looking at the lobby now here, we still see Liu Li on a 11-game win streak now, has that Kaisa. I wonder, like, that's the kind of situation where maybe we get one of those rare 100 HP wins, just in such a good spot. Goose leveling to 8, TXE leveling to 8. Right now, looking at the bottom of the lobby, Goobums, unfortunately with that recombobulator that didn't quite work out to an optimal situation, kind of struggling a bit. TXE off the 8th place last game. I really hope, you know, trying to turn that around and not go back-to-back 8th places. But yeah, we're kind of seeing right now the performance of these lobbies be very similar game to game, at least right now.
We'll see whether or not Goose can keep up that momentum. Going up against Dudu, who has an Ari set up right now with Chalice of Power also trying to anchor it. Oh my goodness, the Quinn stopping the R from being able to charge up. She doesn't have mana either, so she is pretty much neutralized for the mid stages of this fight. Oh, the Edge of Night on the Echo decided to give Tryndamere a little bit of a walk home, as he does end up having to stay away from that comp for quite some time. And does end up potentially swinging the fight here. That was a really interesting combination. I wasn't expecting that interaction, and Goose ends up taking a loss from it. An excellent win there from Dudu, who needed to also preserve his HP.
Yeah, for sure. Another interesting meta point is we talked about how in like day 1 of this tournament we saw a lot of sort of greeting to level, you know, level 8 at 4-5 with very high economy. In this lobby and kind of today, we've seen the opposite. We're seeing a lot of 4-2 level 8 roll downs where the pressure is really high, not giving a lot of people a ton of gold to roll down with here. And so that's applying a lot of pressure, I think, again, with these top-heavy lobbies that we're seeing. So it's interesting that even just across a 3-day tournament, in a patch that the players had more than 2 weeks to play with, we're still seeing meta shifts lobby to lobby, and that's really fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think so. There's definitely also some tech being stolen. I think one of the things that people were really trying to highlight going into the tournament was whether or not Kazi's able to get it done. The Void Assault was able to finish off the Sivir 1 in the corner. This is terrible news for Altenaway. He needed to preserve as much HP as possible, and now he's losing. An excellent job done by TXE to get the streak, and now our Oceania representative is also streaking alongside Liu Li, who's still at 100 HP. That's not a big surprise given that he found the Kaisa. Oh my goodness, Goobum just found another spatula, by the way. Things are really heating up.
Yeah, for sure. That might be a Tactician's Crown for Goobums. That's got to feel good. And you make a really good point there, that even in these Voracious Appetite lobbies, I was talking about Malzahar and Kaisa a lot, but Kha'Zix is another one who can constantly drop aggro, give him something like a Bloodthirster or a Hand of Justice, can do a bunch of damage and heal back up. and by the end of the fight, when he gets that massive amount of AD and AP, just starts to one-shot things, heal to full health. One-shot things, heal to full health. So now we're at that level 5 roll down. You look at the sidebar, and you see a bunch of level ups, a bunch of 2-stars. We get a quick look at the items here, and look at that. TXE with 3 Zerots, and a Edge of Night, Liquid Goose with an Edge of Night and 2 Zerot portals. So you can definitely see who the players in the lobby are that are really favoring that right now. Even Goobums has that Zerot portal, Lilo has that Zerot portal, so yep, that's kind of where we're at here.
We'll see who ends up getting those mutants online. Dudu does find the Kaisa. He does not have any Zerot portals, though. He's just trying to use his usual front line in order to feed the Kaisa, which can be a little bit tricky because sometimes that extra AP will be able to help her scale. Doesn't able to get the second Monsoon, and that's going to be a win, a very crucial win for Atonokwe as we head into the 4-6 augment. TXE takes a heavy loss. So does Goose. What happens to Goobums versus Lilo? It's like Goobums able to get it done with the Jin, holding the G and the Hodge. You love to see it.
Definitely not the the itemization you would be expecting here. Looking at TXE's board, he's kind of in that mutant. These are not really the augments you want, although Stand United with how many traits he has active, not too bad here. So we get to see a version of the Kha'Zix one that I was talking about here with the Edge of Night, with the Hand of Justice, 3 Zerot portals here. This is not a bad version. It's certainly not as good as the Kaisa version, but it can do pretty well here. And so hopefully this can at least turn it around for a bit and maybe hit a top 4 from this position. There's just so much pressure in the rest of the lobby. The other thing to call out here is Dudu had that Kaisa, but one of the things missing was he had the Jeweled Gauntlet instead of a healing item. When you get that much power on the Kaisa, getting a little bit of healing to allow that Kaisa to go infinite ends up being very, very valuable here. And so not going that route, as we saw in the last fight, that can cause the Kaisa to get taken down as they drop from that Edge of Night stealth effect for a bit. So yeah, and we do have to call out Luli is at 14 games in a row. If he wins this one, it's 15 in a row. That is a crazy start to be in.
I mean, it's unprecedented. We did not expect that whatsoever. Speaking of not expected, this Kha'Zix is coming in hot, trying to eliminate the back line. Jinx does drop in, but Kha'Zix is immediately with the Void Assault able to finish it off. Dudu somehow is going to find Kaisa 1 trying to go for the big wipe, and able to get it done just as Kha'Zix was looking for his keys. That's right. Was it in the couch? Did you leave it on the kitchen counter? What was Kha'Zix looking for, Mort? Couldn't find the Kaisa.
You know, it's funny. I was just talking about how we needed healing to keep it alive, and it almost died there, but I forgot about the thrill of the hunt. And so the thrill of the hunt saved that Kaisa at the last minute, getting a bunch of procs there, going back to full health and keeping it alive. So thrill of the hunt making a big difference there. Feels really good here. And so now TXE definitely at the end of the lobby, but Lili did lose, so only 14. We get a look at the augments here. Getting that mutant crest, that's got to feel good for the first place player. Stand United, Keepers. Liu Li got the Ornn augment. That's going to be pretty good. Built different. That can't be right. I'm wondering what Woozle got. That can't be right. But otherwise, Stand United, pretty good. So, yeah, nothing too crazy to call out there.
Yeah, what a crazy scenario would that be, where you somehow magically get offered build different at 4-6, and then all of a sudden, wide pivot with Challenger Unity. I mean, that's definitely a little sus. Speaking of which, I want to highlight one thing that I think TXT is doing very well, which is he's offering his weak units as a sacrifice. He's not upgrading things like his Vex, and more importantly, he's spreading out his Zerot portals. I see too many people actually stacking the Zerot portal and making them very vulnerable to a Zephyr, which means that their Zerot portals won't die. And then by the time the power comes in, it's a little bit too late. So a really good heads up itemization there from TXC. Hopping on board with Woozle, a player who doesn't have the build different. He has Keepers, giving that extra HP shield, but can he find a way to handle all the pressure from the Kaisa from his fellow Korean player? Oh, yes, what the? A 7-unit victory over Dudu, and now Woozle's preserving HP, applying pressure to everybody he's going up against.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting looking at that composition we just saw from Woozle there, as he had the Keeper shield and the Locket shield. That is a lot of extra health. One of the things we talk about with the Scrap Sivir comp and how powerful it is the fact that you've got those massive Scrap shields, and it's just a ton of HP to burn through. It's almost like he's created his own mock version of that Scrap shield for his Challenger comp. And that's kind of a neat variation to see. We don't see Keeper played that often here. Shifting over to Goose's board, we're seeing him try to pull it together here. Has the Ari, but as far as carries go with Voracious Appetite, Ari is not optimal, ends up being a little too slow. Even when capped, unless you've gotten multiple caps off, it's just really not what you're looking for. So it's a bit unfortunate for Goose, but again, kind of expected when the lobby is this contested and a bunch of people have already hit.
And Leiloa, one of those players who did hit one of those Kaisas, and now it's a battle between Kaisa that's not really itemized here for Tenokwe. He does end up getting his assassinated on his carry, and it's now down to just whether this Kaisa can get another Monsoon, and it is enough. Tenokwe is gonna barely survive.
Oh.
TXT does not though. TXT takes another 8th place. Oh dear, and more importantly, it opens up more mutant opportunities for those that survive. With each mutant player that passes, it almost has a metaphorical voracious appetite to the remaining mutant players in the lobby.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely true, and that's why oftentimes when you look at like the end result of these kind of lobbies that are very Voracious Appetite heavy, what you see is like 1 or 2 of the players that really just crashed out, couldn't hit because it was so contested, but the ones at the top then all of a sudden start to hit the really capped boards, and they'll get their first places that look really, really strong. And so it won't be a surprise if Voracious Appetite wins this lobby. In fact, I'd call it expected. What'll be more interesting is the comps that were able to get that 3rd or 4th, despite, you know, choosing the opposite road that wasn't as popular.
Well, from Li Lu's perspective as well, as Tenokwe actually has to fight for survival here, and another wipe is going to take him out. Oh no! The 2 smaller regions, LATAM and OC, holding hands in 7th and 8th. That is not what we want to see whatsoever as we take a look at the Stage 5 carousel, and just 1 extra point. Wait, hold on. There's a Kaisa with a chalice. There's also a mutant emblem. Goose immediately going for it. Dudu able to get the Kaisa. Woo!
Yeah, first thing's taken. That's not a surprise in this lobby. Do want to call out that Liu Li used that 14-game win streak, is already level 9, and so we can expect him to start to get really capped out, maybe get some of those really big legendary units. Now that he's got plenty of gold and plenty of time to work with and 95 health, would not surprise me. But for Dudu here, the big thing was taking that chalice. That was the Kaisa 2 here, and so he gets level 9, which is an extra unit. And again, every unit counts because the way Voracious Appetite works is every time a unit dies, you're getting more AP, more AD to power up that Kaisa. This Kaisa is going to be a beast, and we're starting to see the end game of this comp and why it is just considered the S++ tier meta right now.
Yep, that's right. Also gets a lot of front-loaded stats because of Stand United as well, which is a great way to play around it if you don't get the vertical mutant. And face off against Liu Li, who's aiming for that top 2 plays, does have a Tom Kench as well to potentially print even more items. It's a very strong setup. Here comes the Jinx, here comes the Kaisa, the Super Mega Death Rocket, as well as the Monsoon is going to wombo combo the other Kaisa. But Liu Li has 50 gold at 9, so I can't help but wonder, is anybody actually capable of taking the Chinese giant down? And if Liu Li gets a top 2 or better, then he will also join Li Luo, who is guaranteed to be a checkmate from this game forward with a 6th place or better guarantee. Li Luo did exactly what he set out, which is win streak, and you know, peter out here in 5th or 6th. That's totally fine.
Board. Look at this bench.
Oh my god, I just noticed it. Yes, 8 units of everything. Just needs to hit any of the challengers, and he didn't hit one of them. This is a terrible spot, and now he's going up against a capped board from his fellow Korean.
Yeah, players call this the cursed state when you have 888 sitting on your bench. Feels really, really bad here. But I gotta say, props to Woozle. Again, I was talking about the player that chooses the lane uncontested, you know, is doing really good sitting high on the health. Probably likely to get a 3rd place this lobby, but that's still really good for taking that uncontested route. The other thing to call out with these lobbies, the Voracious Appetite lobbies have this weird property where a lot of fights come down to just the Kaisa. And so what that also means is that the player damage is pretty low. I kind of expect us to get most of the way through Stage 6, maybe even into Stage 7, which has kind of been the opposite of what we've seen all tournament, because these are all very, very slow-paced fights, in the sense that Kaisa is the thing that cleans it up. And so, you know, so we're seeing even like Goose and Lilo there with 12 health. I think might take, you know, 1 or 2 rounds for them to get knocked down.
Well, it might be a little sooner here if Goose can't find the Kaisa, as right now that's not what he's looking for. I do want to highlight one thing about Wuzel's comp. There is one unit in his arsenal that actually is really good specifically against Kaisa. Does find the Tryndamere 3, but that's not the unit I'm talking about. It's the Quinn 3. Because Quinn 3 will target the highest attack speed champion on the enemy team. And guess what? That's always going to be Kaisa on the mutant boards. If he finds a way to even find additional damage amplification on that Kaisa 3, she could quietly be the counter to this lobby. And I'm just going to say it out here. If Wuzel finds a way to stabilize his board, he could be a very dark horse for top 2 in this lobby.
Yeah, I agree. The trick comes down to, can you get the Kaisa to proc the Edge of Night early in the fight? Because if you can, then I agree. Otherwise, the Edge of Night will cleanse the disarm, and that kind of leaves you in that situation where that Kaisa gets that final cast, kind of guaranteed. Very reminiscent of the Gizmos and Gadgets Guardian Angel version. And here we can see, so for example, the Kaisa is just going to do so much damage right there. That's going to be the challenge here. But we get a side here, and Liu Lo ended up going 6th place, Goose out in 5th. So that's kind of the situation we are at right now.
Yeah, that's a good 5th there from Goose, because if he went 6th, he gets 1 fewer point, and Liloa now has crossed that threshold at 18 points. I do want to note that Leo Lee is very wisely recognizing it's not just a Kaisa show. You can also add Jinx in and really start to cap out your board in a really powerful way. Speaking of Jinx, due to his streaking, 26 HP, also has a Jinx too. And that's going to be really good against giant clumped up comps like this. Goobum trying to max out Keepers, a comp that he played to perfection in set 4. Gets the Zephyr onto the Quinn, which is great, so that he doesn't get the Disarming Assault immediately onto his champions. And now here comes the big Chaos Race from the Victor, trying to see if he can get big damage onto the composition. He does. A second cast, perhaps? Only one was able to get there, and now Tryndamere has to fight 1v5. Is not going to be enough. Goobum able to survive a crucial fight against Wuzel, who's now down to 6 HP. It doesn't seem like that prophecy will be fulfilled. I don't think Wuzel is in a spot to fight for top 2 unless he can find Warwick 3, but he leveled to 8, and he has no gold to roll. I don't even think Warwick 3 would be that good here.
Yeah, I don't think that changes too much here. I do want to call out, though, again, we talked about this multiple times in this lobby now. The players you really got to admire in this lobby right now are Goobums and Wuzel. Wuzel choosing a very unconventional 6 Challenger Keeper, managing to top 4 with it. And then Goobums, you know, he's kind of struggled with that itemless Jhin earlier, but that Recombobulate, turning that into a top 4, maybe even a top 3. These are the players that, again, chose to go the uncontested route, were rewarded for it, and got those points towards that checkmate format. And so that's got to feel really good here. Just the Kaisa and... Oh, the Zac! The Zac!
Oh, he barely lived by 1 unit. The hair of his chinny chin chin. Dudu still gets the right to play, but now Luli is back into his pool. Let's take a look at the carousel and see if there's anything in particular that stands out. I look at an Edge of Night. I look at there's the fact that there's a spatula in case there's some floating components. I don't think Dragon's Claw is going to be very useful, but Wuzel goes for it because he has so many 3-star units. There's so much Duck Duck Goose happening around here. What's happening? Goose is eliminated in 5th, but I feel like we're still playing with him in the lobby. No one knows what they want on the carousel.
Yeah, it felt like a lot of people were really making some tough decisions there, right? The Frozen Heart to possibly slow the attack speed of something like the Kaisa, the Dragon Claw, which prevents a lot of the damage. I think one of the reasons this Tryndamere has been so successful has been that Dragon Claw. Liu Li here, though, makes a Tactician's Crown, getting an extra unit, which when playing the comp, again, that's an extra proc of the Voracious Appetite. So all of these players just got quite a bit stronger here. And so now this fight could, is going to bring us down to our top 2. And again, these are 1-2 points difference here, so it's going to see how it plays out. Frozen Heart Echo on the back line, slowing down that Jinx and the Kaisa. But unfortunately, again, that Kaisa is just so strong. We get a big Victor cast trying to wipe the board here. Here comes the Kaisa's second cast, and that's likely going to wipe the board. Goobum's out in 4th, unless we see Wuzel. Wuzel also knocked out. And nope, Goobum's in 3rd, Wuzel in 4th, and we are left with our 2 Voracious Appetite mutant players.
What happened there, Goobums? You had a Zephyr on your bench that you didn't use, and you're in a position to take down some of the front line. The earlier you can proc the Edge of Night we're talking about, the better. Very surprising. Oh my god. There are 2 Tom Kench 2s on the field here for Lil Lee. I don't even know. Like, you can't even eat the Galio. I'm really curious how this is gonna do. He has so many 2-star legendaries and a tactician's crown because he's been eating all the mutant emblems. This is an incredibly capped board. Can anything take it down? I don't think so. It is Devour galore. The buffet is open. He's got a big appetite and a Kaisa to boot. There's just no chance in hell. Lil Lee take.
And this is the end of game 3, and I will see you on the next game.